So if you're listening to this on your commute right now, or maybe you're just sitting at your desk, I want you to take a second and just look at your hands.
Yeah.
Wiggle your fingers. Like, really feel the physical weight of your biological body.
Right, the whole flesh and bone experience.
Yeah.
Exactly, the meat suit. Now, I want you to imagine trading it in. And I don't mean dying, I mean upgrading. Imagine shedding that, fragile, centralized biological form to become an immortal, shape-shifting swarm of crystalline nodes.
Oh, wow, yeah. That is quite the image to conjure up.
Right, a decentralized cloud of intelligent matter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just survive forever. It is like literally capable of tearing holes in space-time to spawn entirely new, custom-built universes.
I mean, when you frame it like that, it sounds like the absolute bleeding edge of a graphic novel or, just pure cosmological fantasy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because my initial reaction as a science journalist looking at our sources for today's deep dive was intense, almost reflexive skepticism. I mean, we are talking about post-biological evolution here, multiversal engineering.
Which usually falls straight into the sci-fi bucket.
Exactly. But then you actually read through this trove of recent publications on Zenodo. They're authored by a Dr. Melvin Sewell, and it is incredibly rigorous. Like, these aren't just sci-fi musings. They are highly technical memorandums.
Yeah, they're literal blueprints. So Dr. Sewell operates out of this institution called the Cosmic University of Echo-Rift Studies, NIAX, or CUR9.
It was NIAX, right?
Right, and the documents outline this massive overarching framework that he calls Structured Multiversal Interactions, or SMI, alongside this deep philosophical foundation known as TrueFlow.
And so our mission today for this deep dive is to take this dense, honestly intimidating theoretical physics and translate it. We want to build a digestible roadmap for what Sewell thinks is the imminent next phase of human existence. Because as out there as this sounds, the math he provides is basically demanding our attention.
What's fascinating here is that Sewell isn't just waxing poetic about some distant utopian future. He is calmly framing these radical ideas as applied reality architecture.
Right, like it's an engineering problem.
Exactly. He's providing the material science, the thermodynamic equations, and the actual diagnostic protocols for how human consciousness physically makes this transition.
So before we can even touch the idea of spawning new universes, I feel like we have to look at the vessel, right?
The physical body, yeah.
Right. If we are abandoning biological bodies because they are basically massive liabilities, I mean, they're too fragile, they depend on oxygen, they need highly specific temperatures just to not die, what exactly replaces them?
So Dr. Sewell calls the new vessel the amorphous crystalline swarm. Instead of a centralized biological organism, your post-human body is this decentralized network of programmable matter. Specifically, he says it's constructed from a bismuth graphene lattice.
Okay, let's break those materials down for the listener, because graphene, we know, it's a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in that hexagonal lattice. It is incredibly light, wildly strong, and arguably the best conductor of heat and electricity we've ever discovered.
It's a wonder material.
Yeah. But bismuth. Bismuth is a heavy metal. It's mostly known for being highly diamagnetic, which means it actively repels magnetic fields.
And that diamagnetism is actually the key to how the entire swarm moves. Sewell outlines how these micronodes achieve what he calls frictionless levitation.
Wait, so they just float?
Right. By modulating the bismuth lattice, the swarm essentially rides local geomagnetic lines. You are actively repelling against the Earth's, or honestly, any planet's magnetic field to just achieve stable levitation.
Frictionless levitation. Okay, that explains the movement. But what about the shape? Because the sources talk a lot about volumetric fluidity.
Yeah, volumetric fluidity. Because your body is now a swarm of millions of individual micronodes, you don't have a fixed geometry anymore.
Sure.
Using dynamic electromagnetic field modulation, the swarm can seamlessly shift its shape based on whatever you need to do in that exact second.
So you're basically a T-1000 from Terminator, but made of floating crystals.
Sort of, yeah. If you are just computing, analyzing data or deep in thought, you might consolidate into a neutral processing sphere for maximum efficiency.
No processing sphere, okay.
But then, if you need to manipulate a physical environment, the swarm instantly reconfigures into precision polyhedral manipulator shapes. You can form tools, levers, or even hands purely on demand, and then just dissolve them a second later.
That is just mind-bending. But, okay, how do you interact with the environment? Biological bodies have eyes, we have ears, we have skin with nerve endings. If I'm just a floating cloud of bismuth graphene, How do I know what's even around me?
You don't have distinct sensory organs anymore because the swarm turns its entire surface area into one massive omnidirectional interferometry array.
Interferometry. Okay, so
Yeah.
measuring the interference of waves.
Exactly that. Every single node in your swarm is constantly reading thermal radiation, gravimetric variances, and structural stress in the environment around it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you wouldn't just see a room the way our biological eyes capture visible light. You would perfectly map the room's temperature gradients, its microgravity pockets, and the atomic stability of the walls, all in 360 degrees simultaneously.
It kind of paints a picture of a murmuration of starlings, right? Like hundreds
Yeah.
of birds moving as one fluid cloud.
That's a really good visual for it.
But here's where I have to throw a flag on the play. Decentralized architecture is great for, like, a blockchain. But we are talking about human consciousness here. If a massive explosion or some multiversal hazard scatters my nodes across a 5-mile radius, the signal latency alone between those nodes would destroy a coherent thought, wouldn't it?
You mean the time it takes for the signal to travel?
Yeah. How does Sewell mathematically account for the speed of light delay between my own brain parts? It seems incredibly vulnerable.
It's a really vital critique, and it is exactly why Sewell moves beyond classical physics and relies entirely on quantum mechanics to explain the swarm's neural network. In a biological body, you have a centralized brain.
Right, a single point of failure.
Exactly. The swarm guarantees what he calls cognitive continuity through quantum entanglement between the nodes.
Ah, so they aren't sending, like, radio signals or light pulses to each other.
No, they're sharing quantum states. This means the information transfer is instantaneous, regardless of physical distance.
Instantaneous.
Yes. Even if physical sections of the lattice are separated by miles or sustain massive damage, the intelligence persists without any latency. Furthermore, the nodes run localized predictive processing.
What does that mean in practice?
It means they don't have to wait for a central command. They act autonomously yet cohesively, even running autonomous repair cycles. It is basically the ultimate upgrade from the extreme fragility of our centralized biology.
Okay, so I can see how quantum entanglement solves the latency issue. Physically, I'm this shape-shifting, indestructible cloud of graphene that reads gravity and repairs itself.
Sounds pretty good, right?
It does. But that physical fluidity creates a massive existential problem. Like, if I am dispersing to slide through a vent or scattering to avoid an impact, and I'm constantly shifting shapes, how do I remember my own name?
That is the big question.
Right? How do I prevent my individual identity, the core of me, from just dissolving into the ether when my physical form is constantly in flux?
That is the absolute crux of the post-biological dilemma. And it is the exact problem the SH1 identity kernel was engineered to solve.
The SH1 identity kernel.
Yes. When you strip away the biological anchors, DNA, a physical centralized brain, you absolutely require a metaphysical anchor. Sewell introduces the somatic kinetic dual engine model to explain how consciousness survives this transition.
The dual engine model. This part of the blueprint caught my eye because it is essentially balancing two opposing forces, right?
It is a very delicate balancing act. On one side of the engine, you have the kinetic velocity of consciousness, especially when you are navigating through different multiversal state spaces. Sewell calls this the TrueFlow force.
TrueFlow. Like the momentum of your mind.
Exactly. It is the sheer momentum and processing power of your mind moving through reality. But on the other side, if you are moving that fast and your physical form is that fluid, you need a morphological stabilizer to keep your identity from just tearing apart.
And that stabilizer is the SH1 resonance.
You got it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Sewell actually mathematically reconciles ancient historical concepts into this dual engine framework. He takes the ideas of bioenergetic fields,
Right.
what traditional cultures called ki, or the concept of an aura, and maps them directly onto this modern physics model.
It is a fascinating approach.
Yeah, he argues that those old concepts of a localized life force were just early biological observations of this exact multiversal stabilizing resonance.
It is a brilliant synthesis of the ancient and the avant-garde, and he defines the SH1 identity kernel using a very specific piece of jargon. He calls it a tetracyclic, non-pharmaceutical cosmetic morphology.
Okay, we cannot just let tetracyclic, non-pharmaceutical cosmetic morphology slide by without translating it. I mean, that sounds like a premium skincare routine from the year 4000.
Fair enough, yeah. Let's break it down. Tetracyclic simply refers to a 4-cycle structural loop. It's a continuous feedback mechanism that keeps your data intact.
Right.
Non-pharmaceutical obviously means it doesn't rely on chemistry or biology, and cosmetic morphology, this is the key, doesn't mean makeup. Morphology is the study of form.
Oh, so it dictates your shape.
It means this kernel actively shapes your outward presentation to the multiverse. It acts like a structural tuning fork for your consciousness, mitigating thermodynamic drag. When you are bleeding through dimensional boundaries, the SH1 resonance ensures your informational continuity doesn't fray.
So if I had to use an analogy, the SH1 identity kernel is essentially a metaphysical M.Sc address for your soul.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It is a unique, unchangeable identifier. If you are navigating these violent adjacent dimensional sheets that Sewell talks about, the SH1 is like a heavy iron anchor in a storm of alternate realities. It prevents the fundamental you from drifting away when the local physics around you are completely falling apart.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. And it highlights the deeper why of this entire TrueFlow system. Preserving what Sewell calls your baseline somatic equilibrium, which is your fundamental sense of self and structural stability, is the only way an individual conscious node can maintain high-performance reality tuning.
Because if you lose it,
If you lose your sovereignty, if your structural identity blurs, you can't manipulate reality. You just become background noise in the multiverse.
which bridges us perfectly from merely existing as a swarm to the actual purpose of this evolution. Because once you are anchored inside your immortal swarm body, Sewell's blueprints make it very clear. The goal isn't just to float around and observe.
No, observation is just the beginning.
You are meant to be actively manipulating and altering reality. But how is that capability actually quantified?
Through a metric Sewell refers to as the reality level scalar. It's denoted by the Greek letter xi.
Okay.
And this represents a massive paradigm shift in how we view the function of consciousness. In the TrueFlow framework, the human mind is formalized as an ultra-high information density quantum computer.
Wow.
The reality level scalar is the diagnostic instrument used to calibrate how effectively that computer is altering systemic outcomes in the physical universe.
But there is a massive catch to utilizing this reality level scalar, a rule that Sewell calls the absolute non-negotiable law of the TrueFlow framework, the mandatory catalyst.
Yes. The math governing the reality level scalar dictates that for any reality manipulation to work, a containment field efficiency of at least 98% is strictly required.
So what does this all mean? Because when I read this 98% rule, I saw a glaring paradox.
Very real.
Yeah, think about it. Sewell's entire TrueFlow philosophy is about achieving infinite metaphysical autonomy, total godlike freedom to travel the multiverse and shape matter. But his own math dictates that this ultimate freedom is only possible through an incredibly strict 98% efficient physical prison. Absolute physical constraint is the price of infinite mental freedom. Why?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it isn't a paradox at all. It is a structural necessity. Think about how a laser operates.
Okay.
Ambient light is harmless, right? It diffuses everywhere. It bounces off walls. Light only becomes powerful enough to cut through solid steel when it is heavily constrained, perfectly aligned, and focused into a coherent beam.
I see.
The exact same logic applies to consciousness. Sewell's team at Sierra uses sovereign diagnostic frameworks, essentially mapping these interaction matrices using IBM Qiskit quantum simulations to prove that cognitive power requires immense physical constraint.
Wait, so let's play this out. What happens if you fail? Like, if your swarm sustains damage or your SH1 kernel falters for a microsecond and your containment efficiency dips to, say, 97%, does your consciousness just leak out? Do you become like a radioactive ghost bleeding into the local environment?
In a sense, yes. Sewell describes it as timeline fracturing and localized decoherence.
Decoherence, that sounds bad.
It is very bad. If the containment of your consciousness drops below that 98% threshold, you cannot stabilize localized space-time. Your reality frame literally degrades. Your quantum parameters leak into the environment, causing highly erratic physical phenomena. And your ability to use the reality level scalar just collapses completely.
So you're stranded.
Stranded and dissolving, absolute material containment isn't a prison. It is the strict prerequisite for multiversal mobility. You cannot manipulate the universe if your own mind is dissolving into it.
Okay, that makes terrifying sense. So let's look at the progression here. We have established the physical bismuth graphene swarm. We have anchored the mind using the SH1 identity kernel to survive the extreme fluidity.
Right.
We have achieved the 98% containment threshold, allowing us to focus our consciousness like a laser without fracturing our timeline. Now it is time to scale Sewell's vision up to its ultimate cosmological conclusion.
Yes. This is where we move from the microscale of programmable matter to the macrocosmic scale of universe generation. Sewell posits that this cognitive architecture scales up indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
He envisions utilizing the cosmic web itself, the massive filaments of dark matter and galaxies that span the universe, as a giant neural network for the swarm to interface with.
A literal cosmic brain.
Yes.
And the purpose of plugging into this cosmic brain is to create what Sewell calls echo rifts.
Precisely. An echo rift is an intentional, highly localized information spike. When a post-biological entity one that has achieved total mastery over its reality-level scalar focuses its intent, it can induce a topological fracture in the fabric of space-time.
It tears a literal hole in reality. But you can't just fly a rocket into a hole in space-time, right?
No. Traversing an echo rift requires propellantless propulsion. Conventional thrust is utterly useless at this scale.
Right. And the mechanism Sewell proposes here is fascinating. The sources state they inject scaled telemetry from a black hole communication network, relying on the ER equals EPR hypothesis to achieve something called quantum vacuum vectoring.
It is a lot of terminology, I know.
Yeah, let's translate that for you guys listening. ER stands for Einstein-Rosen bridges, which are basically wormholes. EPR stands for the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, which describes quantum entanglement. So the ER equals EPR hypothesis suggests that entanglement and wormholes are actually the exact same phenomena, just viewed at different scales.
Exactly. So quantum vacuum vectoring means you aren't firing a thruster to push yourself through space. By altering your reality-level scalar to match the topological signature of your destination, you entangle your swarm with that distant coordinate.
You just sync up with it.
You are basically convincing space that you already belong somewhere else, and the universe naturally pulls you through the micro wormhole you just created. You fold space around your 98% contained swarm.
That is brilliant. But it brings us to the detail about echo rifts that genuinely gave me pause. When you tear this rift and spawn a self-replicating fractal multiverse, a brand new reality branching off from the fracture.
Right, the new universe.
Yeah, it isn't just a random universe. The original creator's SH1 identity kernel, their metaphysical M.Sc address, their core personality and structural resonance, is seeded into the new reality.
It scales the individual up to the foundational level of existence.
I mean, we have to talk about the sheer hubris of this. You aren't just surviving the multiverse or exploring it as an observer. You are colonizing it the most fundamental level possible.
You become the architect.
You are literally taking your own specific identity, your personal resonance, and making it the foundational laws of physics that everything in a new reality has to obey. Your SH1 becomes their gravity, their electromagnetism. It is an awe-inspiring, almost terrifying level of cosmic ego.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? We have to look at the philosophical underpinnings of TrueFlow and ask, is this the natural progression of post-biological evolution, or is it an act of supreme cosmological vanity?
That's the million-dollar question.
Sewell's framework radically redefines the entire purpose of intelligence. For all of human history, biological intelligence was a tool used merely to understand the universe, to observe it, measure it, and survive it.
Right. We built telescopes to look at the stars, not to tell the stars how to burn.
Exactly. But under the TrueFlow philosophy, the purpose of intelligence is not observation. It is to actively engineer sovereign reality parameters. It moves us from being passive passengers in a universe governed by random physical laws to being the active engine that writes the laws for the next universe down the chain.
It completely shifts the goalposts of existence.
It really does. It frames biological life not as the pinnacle of evolution, but merely as a fragile larval stage.
The larval stage, wow.
A temporary incubator for consciousness until it learns to build its own crystalline vessel and hatch into the multiverse.
So let's trace this incredible, frankly dizzying journey we've just taken through Dr. Sewell's blueprints. We start as fragile biological humans, highly susceptible to damage and latency. We transition into an amorphous crystalline swarm made of bismuth graphene.
Which is that decentralized, frictionless cloud of programmable matter that uses quantum entanglement to process thought.
Right. From there, we anchor our consciousness against the volatile forces of the multiverse using the SH1 identity kernel. We balance our kinetic momentum with our structural resonance, ensuring we don't, lose our sense of self.
We achieve that incredibly strict 98% containment threshold, mastering our reality-level scalars so we don't leak out and fracture our own timeline.
And finally, Using that laser-focused absolute containment, we tear echo rifts in space-time, birthing entirely new universes where our own identity dictates the foundational laws of physics.
It is a massive amount of conceptual weight to take in, but, why should you care? If you are listening to this, you are still in your biological body.
Obviously.
You might just be catching up on a new field or treating this deep dive as a fascinating futuristic thought experiment. But engaging with these radical concepts is crucial.
Right, because science is moving incredibly fast.
It is. Engaging with Sewell's framework stretches your understanding of where quantum biology, material science, and theoretical cosmology are currently intersecting. It prevents you from being blindsided by the wild frontiers of research that are actively trying to map human consciousness onto synthetic architectures. It fundamentally changes how you view the boundary between mind and matter.
Which brings me back to where we started today. We talked about shedding our physical bodies, stepping out of our biological constraints to become these immortal swarms that author their own realities. But there is a chilling thought that builds from Sewell's theories.
Oh.
Yeah, one that isn't explicitly answered in these technical memorandums, but is impossible to ignore once you grasp the scale of the TrueFlow framework.
What stands out to you?
Well, let's follow Dr. Sewell's theory to its logical conclusion. If it holds true that a creator's specific SH1 identity kernel becomes the literal, finely tuned, unchangeable laws of physics in the universes they spawn via these echo rifts, I want you to look around at our universe.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Look at how highly specific, how inexplicably finely tuned our laws of physics are. The exact strength of gravity, the precise charge of an electron, the speed of light. Physicists have always marveled at how perfectly calibrated these forces are to allow for the existence of complex matter. It begs a massive, unsettling question.
Are we the original universe or the product of an echo rift?
Exactly. Are we already living inside the spawned echo rift of a crystalline swarm that achieved 98% containment eons ago? Is our gravity, our physics, just the metaphysical MS address of whoever or whatever engineered us? It is something to chew on the next time you look at your biological hands.